Hello to my watercolor students out in Merced College. I am going to talk to you about this week's learning objectives. We are going to venture away from the textbook for a while to work on a studio project that I find pretty exciting, and I hope that you do too. Anyhow, let me jump right into this PowerPoint. Share screen. Let's see. So for this work of art here, I'm sharing with you a piece made by a colleague of mine, Steve Norton, in that he is out at Madeira Community College. This is another school where I also teach. And that he is actually teaching watercolor right now, and that he has been teaching for several years, and I actually learned a lot from him, and that he's giving me a lot of tips and teaching you guys. And so I hope that you learn something from this assignment and that you can see an example of work done by one of my colleagues, which I find very, very strong, very interesting work, especially in terms of the style that he has. He's more about vibrancy and color. And I'm not really that type of artist. I feel like I lead more towards more monochromatic color themes. I like more muted color themes or more pastel color themes, but he is more about saturation, and he's so good at it. And so this work here, Cubist Cat, is an example of cubism, which is something that we are going to talk about. One of my favorite genres of art. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit about cubism. And here is an example of cubism by Pablo Picasso, one of the most recognizable names in Western art history. And the piece is called Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. I don't see the full title here, but Les Demoiselles, I guess, is the nickname of this work. The original name is Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. In other words, the young women of Avignon. And so I'm just going to go ahead and read over the definition here. Cubism made around 1907, and it lasted a few good years, 7 years, until 1914. So Cubism utilized a reconstruction of objects based on fragmented geometric abstraction. Artists analyzed their subject matter and depicted it as faceted planar constructions. The paintings have a shallow space and often show more than one viewpoint simultaneously. And so we are looking at this work of art by Picasso, and that some of you might recognize his particular style in which he uses these masks. And I'm wondering if you guys are aware of that. In Europe at the time, they were going through a lot of cultural borrowing, and that Picasso was actually being inspired by these masks made in Africa, these wooden masks. And so this is where Picasso got his ideas from. Many artists at the time were actually venturing into these more exotic lands, such as, of course, Africa, areas such as Oceania, in other words, New Zealand, Papua, some other parts of the South Pacific, also South America, some other island countries in the Atlantic as well. So many artists were borrowing styles from other cultures. And so this is what they were being inspired by at the time. They're moving away from more traditional works of art, such as landscapes and portraits, and they're really focusing more on the overall composition and not so much about something like subject matter, even though subject matter was actually pretty important in terms of this work of art here. And you're probably wondering what it might be about. And I had to jog my memory. I haven't talked about this work of art in a while. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. So Avignon is a place in France known for its popular red light districts. In other words, these places where people go to at night, they party, they drink, and they do that basically all night long, even during the daytime. And so it became very problematic for the people at the time. And that some people say Picasso was making a statement in terms of the way he felt about these red light districts. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. And so we have these figures here, these women, and that they aren't really portrayed in a more idealized fashion. In other words, usually when it comes to the figure, we like to portray them idealistically, try to make them beautiful, try to make them handsome. But Picasso doesn't do that here. Instead, he's portraying a different side. And because it is this abstract work of art, it's very open in terms of the subject matter and any translation that we might have. And that's what Cubism and abstract work of arts do in general, is that they are relatively left open so that the viewers can conjure up their own meaning. Okay, and so I'm going to show you another example also by Picasso. There is this quote here, and I'm just going to, I'll read it for the sake of this presentation. Cubism was a revolutionary new approach to representing reality, invented in around 1907-08 by artists Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque. They brought different views of subjects, usually objects or figures, together in the same picture, resulting in the paintings that appear fragmented and abstracted. And this was from the Tate Modern website, and you can click on that. They're actually added it to our module. And here we have the portrait of Ambroise Vollard, 1910. And again, what Picasso is doing is venturing away from a more traditional approach when it comes to painting the portrait, and giving people a different type of subject matter. Something about Cubism is this idea of deconstructing the objects, deconstructing the figures, and then putting them back together again, and really changing up the space. So we are looking at these different planes. We see darks to lights, which indicate a sense of form, but then it's not continuous to where there is a stabilized source of lighting. Instead, the space feels very ambiguous, and the artists were pushing composition, trying to make more interesting works of art. So I'm going to go ahead, jump into another example here by Georges Braque. And so the subject matters really are different. You don't have to just do the figure. If you want to do something like a landscape and you want to turn that into a Cubist work of art, you may do so. And this piece here is not as, say, deconstructed and reconstructed as much as the previous example. This feels almost like a normal landscape to me, except of course the spacing is not exactly realistic. Instead, it's a little bit more on the ambiguous side. But the colors they feel like local colors. They look like something that you would see in a normal landscape painting. And so when it comes to this piece, this project that you guys are going to work on, the subject matter is open, you get to choose. And so this is actually of a still life here. And something that you'll notice with a lot of the Cubist works of art, they usually stick to a a smaller color palette. So they're using about, 4 or 5 colors at max. And so you want to do something similar to that as well when it comes to your own cubist painting. And something that you'll notice in the instructions is that you're going to want to draw out your shape first using the open and closed shapes, in that you want to not make every shape closed, because you want to allow for these darks and lights to happen. And sometimes if it's too consistent, if it's too connected, then you're going to end up with a pattern, and you don't really want a pattern, if that makes any sense. And so I'll show you another example of what I'm talking about there through this piece, George Brock. And so here we have some open shapes and closed shapes. And because of that, the artist is able to pick and choose how the values are going to appear, opposed to having it too rigid in terms of the construction. You don't want the pattern to be obvious. You want to make it a little bit more dramatic by picking and choosing where you want these darks and lights to happen. And so I think that is the last example I wanted to show you. And yes, again, the subject matter is open. I recommend looking up a few things. You might want to draw something that you are passionate about. It's really all up to you guys. So let me know if you guys have any questions on this assignment. Looking forward to seeing your works, and talk to you guys again soon.